Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Cup of Jonah. Grab your warm cup of coffee and get ready. So don't let me forget, help me remember. After the reading this morning, I want to pick up a reflection that flowed upon our discussion after the reading yesterday about the importance of coming to know for certain some of these higher truths. I think it's really helpful, but I want to touch on that after the reading for today. Excuse me. Don't forget to check out and subscribe on phoneboothpodcast.substack.com. And enjoy. Now, before I get into today's reading, which is titled Chapter 23, that no accident is found in God, I want to walk with you and refresh our minds a little bit for a second on where we've come from in the last few days only. So a few days ago, we had this idea asking if God was his essence. So first of all, we're excluding the possibility, we're remoting away, way of remotion, removing the imperfection of composition or combination of things in the essence, the quiddity, the whatness of a thing. So when we say the word God, is there any composition there? So like in men, for example, we're body and soul. That's our whatness. That's our quiddity. So there's composition in our essence, not in God's. There's also composition between our essence, which isn't necessary. So it has its being for a time. There was a time when it didn't have its being. There was a time when Jonah didn't exist, right? There's a time when you didn't exist. But now, thank God, you and I both exist. So that's a type of combination as well. Now, he's going to go back to the quiddity. Well, now, on top of this existence, there's another type of composition that we've talked about in the past. Remember, accident in the philosophical sense, we usually use it in a way of saying outside of our intention. Oops, right? That's how we talk about accidents in common speech. Philosophically, it's used that way as well, but it's also used as a way of describing something that's outside of the quiddity of a thing, outside of the essence, outside of the what it is of a thing. So Jonah can be bearded or not, overweight or not, right? And risible, which is one of my favorite terms that Thomas and Aristotle use to talk about man as rational animal. Often it means the ability to laugh. That's something that men alone possess, right? No other animal in the animal kingdom laughs. So this risibility is a sign of intelligence. And that's why we say when someone has a quick wit, there's a high intelligence there, right? So very interesting. But so now today, what we're talking about is there combination outside of the quiddity of God? In other words, are there accidents that God has that aren't essential to himself, that fall outside of its quiddity, that rest upon his being, like whiteness or musicality are the examples that Aristotle has used and Thomas used earlier in the book when we talked about accidents before. So keep in mind when we're reading about accidents today that's what it means. So my essence, my quiddity, your quiddity has its being, and then these accidents have existence through our being. So our being gives existence to these properties or to these things that may or may not be in us or on us or about us. So just keep in mind, that's what we're talking about when we're talking about accident here. Okay. But don't let me forget the follow-up consideration from yesterday. All right. That no accident is found in God. It follows necessarily from this truth that nothing can come to God beyond his essence, nor can there be anything in him in an accidental way. For being cannot participate in anything that is not of its essence, although that which is can participate in something. The reason is that nothing is more formal or more simple than being, which thus participates in nothing, but the divine substance is being itself, and therefore has nothing that is not of its substance. Hence, no accident can reside in it. Furthermore, what is present in a thing accidentally has a cause of its presence, since it is outside the essence of a thing in which it is found. If then something is found in God accidentally, this must be through some cause. Now, the cause of the accident is either the divine essence itself or something else. If something else, it must act on the divine essence. Since nothing will cause the introduction of some form, substantial or accidental, in some receiving subject, except by acting on it in some way. For to act is nothing other than to make something actual, which takes place through a form. Thus, God will suffer and receive the action of some cause, which is contrary to what we've already established. Remember, in chapter 13, we established that God is the first cause, and there is no other cause above him or before him. On the other hand, let us suppose that the divine substance is the cause of the accident inhering in it. Now it is impossible that it be, as receiving it, the cause of the accident. For then one and the same thing would make itself to be actual in the same respect. Therefore, if there is an accident in God, it will be according to a different respect that he receives and causes that accident. Just as bodily things receive their accidents through the nature of their matter and cause them through their form. Thus God will be composite, but we have proved the contrary of this proposition above. That was chapter 18, when we said that there was no composition in God. Every subject of an accident, moreover, is related to its potency as potency to act. Since the accident is a certain form, making the subject to be actual according to an accidental being, but as we've shown above, there is no potency in God. That was chapter 16. There can therefore be no accident in him. Then too, when a being has an accident inhering in it in some way, mutable according to its nature, since an accident can inhere or not inhere, if then God has something belonging to him in an accidental way, he will consequently be mutable. Morning, Shiva. But the contrary of this was demonstrated above. Again, in chapter 13, we said that God is not mutable, not changeable, because there was no potency in him. Again, that which has an accident inhering in it is not whatever it has in itself, since an accident is not part of the essence of the subject. Remember, accident by definition is that which is outside the accident, the subject, I'm sorry. But God is what he has in himself. There is therefore no accident in God. The minor proposition is proved thus. Everything is found in a more noble way in the cause than in an effect. But God is the cause of all things. Hence, whatever is in him is there in the most noble way. Now, what a thing itself is, this belongs to it in the most perfect way. For this is something more perfectly one than when something is joined to something else substantially as form to matter. Just as substantial union is more perfect than when something inheres in something else as an accident. In other words, the unions between a man's form and matter, or body and soul, are different. That's a stronger union than an accident like beardedness or whiteness or something else, right? Just as a substantial union, that is, a union within the substance of a thing, is more perfect than when something inheres in something else as an accident, God then is whatever he has. It is also a fact that a substance does not depend on an accident, although an accident depends on a substance. But what does not depend on something can sometimes be found without it. Some substance, then, can be found without an accident. This seems especially to fit the substance that is most simple, such as the divine substance is. The divine substance, therefore, has no accidents whatsoever. In dealing with this problem, Catholics likewise give assent to this opinion, whence Augustine says in his De Trinitate that, quote, there is no accident in God, end quote. The proof of this serves as a refutation of the error of some Saracen theologians, quote, who posit certain intentions superadded to the divine essence, end quote. Very interesting. So, a quick and simple demonstration that there aren't any accidents in God. But this is going to bring up a bunch of mysteries, because we talk as if the way we speak about God is, and we speak about God as if there are accidents sometimes, right? And also, it would seem that this issue raises an issue which we'll resolve, I believe, to your satisfaction. How could God take on flesh and become a man if there's no accidents? Does he take on humanity as an accident somehow? Did he change somehow? So these are interesting questions that seem on the surface to potentially discredit the Christian claim. So there are definitely questions we have to talk about, because these are, again, and this kind of circles back naturally, I love it, to yesterday's reflection after the reading, that because these truths here that we've been talking about are all from reason, and they're all certainly known. So we can know for certain and confidently that God is simple, that God is eternal, that there is one God. Okay? So these are all things that we know for certain through the thought process and the reasoning, scientific reasoning process that we've taken up to this point. This brings me full circle back to the reflection I wanted to add to yesterday's reflection. Yesterday, I was sharing that these thoughts, these scientific, reasoned out knowledge, this growing to a deeper understanding of the reality around us, is so important because it gives us confidence, I was saying yesterday, and we can very easily dispel certain errors and deceptions and see through the imaginary what ifs of our day. For example, it occurred to me since yesterday, there are theories out there that suggest that, or ask the question, were we created by ancient aliens? Was all of creation, are all these religions creations of ancient aliens or of AI? Is this all a simulation? Is this all AI? Is God AI? Well, from what we've reasoned out so far and deduced, those are both impossibilities. There is no cause prior to God. There is none. There cannot be. So therefore, there cannot be, even if there were ancient aliens, those ancient aliens would have to have a first uncaused cause, which would be God. To suppose that AI, a creation of man today, a tool, a very powerful tool, was somehow has been around, maybe it has been around with technology longer than we realize. That's possible, but it's still a creation of man, unless it's demonic. Okay. If it's demonic, then those are fallen angels who are also created by God. So AI is either a portal to beings, to communication with beings that God created, if AI is demonic, which you could make an argument for, especially since a lot of AI engineers who are building these AIs say that sometimes they don't know or understand how the AI comes up with certain answers. They don't know how it does it, which is strange. But supposing that that's not true for a moment, if it is just a tool and an algorithm created by man, to suppose that this artificial intelligence, actually means, so that there's two different products, so to speak, right? Products of nature, like when animals breed, that's products of nature. When a tree grows fruit, that's a product of nature. When men have offspring, that's a product of nature. Or products of art. We call art the fine arts, but every trained discipline, everything that art, because art, as Aristotle and Thomas both say, art builds on nature. So we use the properties in nature to build something on top of, or utilizing the properties that are already there in nature. This is why huge cathedrals are built of stone, not of sand, because of the nature of the elements. So art builds on nature. So artificial intelligence is something that resembles intelligence that was built upon the natures of things that we have around us. The tools, the natures that are disposable to man for his creativity, which is a sign of our participation in the divine intellect, actually, because we're able to create and build upon. So we can't create from nothing, but we can create and pull out of things more than was there originally, so to speak. We can build upon the natures of things through art. Like the chunk of marble can become the Pietà. So this is important to remember, and it actually gives a lot of peace, because remember also the caution of the ancient Greeks, which is also a caution of Thomas and the church, that we often rely on our imagination instead of reason. It's imaginary. It's a fantastic and very entertaining imaginary exercise to ponder what if we were all created by some ancient AI or ancient aliens. It's a fun thought experiment, but that's all it is. And we have to be careful, again, to not rely on our imagination and think we're reasoning, because it's a tempting imaginary image, even if depressing, if you're thinking clearly about it, right? So that's something I think it's important to reflect on, and I think it's important to realize how important this rigorous, disciplined philosophical thought is, and the pondering of these truths, because it really simplifies things for us. It really makes it quite delightfully simple, because we can keep our peace when crazy theories get floated out that challenge either our understanding of who God is, or of the reality around us. And it's nice to be able to dispel those deceptions like that. So that's a very beautiful we were on here. So it is cold today in Georgia. I don't know if you guys, if it's cold where you're at. I know it's not cold in some other places. It's 22 degrees here this morning in Georgia, but it's a little addedly cold, if you will, for me because I live in this metal container house. A bit chilly for sure. So my coffee, which I made during the 10-minute countdown, is already cold. So, all right. So that's what I wanted to share with you today. Tomorrow we're going to talk about substantial difference and then genus after that. Now, why? The reason why is because a definition of something is we have to know its genus and its specific difference. That's what he's referring to, the substantial difference. Pretty sure. I haven't read ahead yet. But if memory serves, that's where he's going with it. The reason those two are together is because, for example, man is an animal, but he's a rational animal. So that's a perfect description of man, one that separates our species from every other species because no other species is rational. So first he's going to say no other species of animal is rational. So first he's going to say, well, there's no specific difference in God. There's no substantial difference in God. In other words, to say he is his own genus. Or is he? And then he's going to ask, is he a genus even? And that'll be interesting as well. So you can see there's order and structure, even just today. Today and yesterday, it's interesting to note how many times he references past chapters, just a few chapters ago. So it's clear that he's building upon conclusions that we've already touched upon. So you can see Thomas as the excellent teacher he is. He's ordering our knowledge. We may scratch our heads at first. Why is he touching on this at this point? But then later, like now, when there are some important questions on the table, we can refer to things that he's already established, that we've already discussed and figured out, so to speak. And that will help us, and that is helping us to think more clearly about things as we move forward. So, there you go. So I look forward to the next couple days with you guys here. And it should be great. So thank you for joining me this morning for yet another episode of Cup of Jonah. And I will see you tomorrow. Have a wonderful rest of your day.